Alright, now that we've wrapped up the semi-final round of the playoffs, we are going to take a look back and see what we learned, starting with Notre Dame taking on Penn State. And I'm not gonna lie, this game was as promised, but neither team looked particularly good while keeping it close. Penn State defense made sure Notre Dame would not have an easy time passing the ball downfield. Notre Dame did the same thing. My favorite stat is that over the course of the entire game, there was not a single pass completed to a Penn State receiver, which, keep that in the back of your mind, we're going to come back around to it. But every scoring drive in the first half came off of 13 play drives or greater, showing just how much a battle of attrition this game was. Then in the second half, the offense came alive a bit more as they would go back and forth with a pair of touchdowns until a late interception thrown by Penn State gave Notre Dame the ball back and they were able to seal it with a field goal. My biggest takeaway from this game really was that we were way too harsh on Indiana week 1. Yes, seeing them get absolutely walked by Notre Dame with all the conversations going around of who deserved to be in and who didn't definitely did kind of sting a little bit, especially for those who really wanted the Indiana miracle run. But when we look back, their only 2 losses of the entire season were to the 2 teams currently in line to face off in the national championship, as we also learned that Notre Dame's defense wasn't just pretty good this season, but absolutely elite, as they have routinely shut down the teams that they've been playing against. And now, looking back at Indiana's win over Michigan late in the season when Michigan was just beginning to fire on all cylinders, is even more impressive seeing what they accomplished in the postseason, but that's neither here nor there. On the flip side, despite the fact that this was a good and close game, I personally cannot help but feel like that Penn State had one of the easiest paths of getting to the semifinals in this first playoff expenditure. I'm not trying to say they didn't deserve to be there. They won their games, but let's just face it, SMU did not look particularly ready to step up to the plate coming off a big ACC championship loss, as Penn State literally had to do just about nothing offensively to get that win. And then the following week, as I and many others predicted, they matched up way too well against this one-dimensional Boise State team where all you had to do was be able to stop Ginty with about 7.5 guys, and then once you do that, as long as your other 3.5 on average matched up pretty well with the receivers, you are going to have a relatively easy time this game. So despite the fact that Ginty broke something stupid like 20 or 30 tackles, their offense simply was not dynamic enough to keep up with the talent of the Nittany Lions, despite the fact that the Lions offense didn't really have to do much at all up to this point. But now on to Notre Dame, because you guys know you're not getting out of this one. You did not look impressive offensively. If you want to have a chance in hell next week against OSU, your quarterback play has to be a lot tighter, and you've got to find a way to move the ball on the ground more efficiently than what you are doing. 42 rushes for 117 yards. Wait, let's not even count what the backup quarterback did, which is rushed twice for negative 12 yards. That means it's a 40 rushes for 129 yards compared to when Ohio State played against the same team and rushed for 41 times to give them an extra 50 yards over what the Fighting Irish did. But this relatively relaxed special teams game plan leaves me to believe that maybe they are keeping something big in store for next week that they didn't want to show. It's either that or they're starting to play a little scared, which isn't good for them. But against this defense, having to rely on a late, really sloppy interception might just not happen against OSU, so they're going to have the lead and hold it. But for the second game of the weekend, we finally saw Ohio State University flinch for the first time ever. The Texas defensive core did a phenomenal job of making Will Howard uncomfortable. So despite a pretty quick jump ahead to 7-0, this game quickly turned into a defensive battle with 8 consecutive punts, where the field position battle slowly shifted from being in Ohio State's favor to Texas's, thanks largely to a lack of field position changing punts by the Buckeyes, where a 39-yarder would give Texas their best field position, and they would use that to time the game up, where in heartbreaking fashion OSU responds with a one-play 75-yard touchdown of their own to maintain the lead before half. But from there, things would get tense as Texas would tie it up in the third before Ohio State puts together an arduous 13-play 88-yard drive, and it looked like Texas was about to tie it up again when they got down to 2nd and goal after a couple of downs resets thanks to penalties, and then there was a fumble 6, and essentially that ended the game. This is easily the second best game of the playoffs so far, at least in my opinion, and it really had a chance to become the best had Texas not fumbled at the goal line, but admittedly, their defense looked a lot more impressive here than they had against any other team up to this point. Despite the fact that they gave up one long, goofy-looking touchdown, they forced Ohio State to fight and claw their way for everything else, and should have honestly been more in this game if it weren't for, and here's my hot take, some pretty middle of the pack quarterback play. Now tell me if I'm missing something here, but this entire playoffs, I have never, not once, been blown away by Quinn Ewers except for his solid passing game at the very end in overtime against Arizona State. I think he may have been fighting an injury, but all in all, I was not thoroughly impressed through and through with his postseason performance. And I get Ohio State has been making plenty of quarterbacks look bad, but to see him in a game where it could have been his time to step up and he just kind of flounders a bit made me a bit sad. Now for Ohio State, this is probably the first time they looked really human on offense. Being able to completely limit Smith and Igbuka to just 54 yards total is a feat in and of itself that hasn't been done in the past 2 games, where they combined for 259 yards against Oregon and 184 against Tennessee. But the actual scary discovery, if you ask me, is that even when you shut them down, even when you limit their ground game to 81 yards, they still have Carnell Tate, who caught 7 passes for 87 yards. Henderson got a 75-yard one shot off a really well-designed screen pass, and they still got 21 points all on their own on offense, despite Texas defense playing easily their best game of the postseason, maybe their best game all in all, considering the competition. But now, for the biggest prediction, the big tuna, the big kahuna, if you will, we are going to be talking about Notre Dame taking on Ohio State, who's winning and why. Well, first, here's the only way I think Notre Dame can win. If Notre Dame sees how Texas warped the pass game and are able to match it, that might be the great equalizer. Now, OSU is going to score. I mean, Penn State scored, and I think OSU is a lot better than Penn State. Indiana scored. We already know how much better OSU is than them. So the question is just how much you can limit the scoring. If you're able to replicate Texas's performance, and you tell me that Ohio State can be held to just 21 points on offense, Notre Dame has a fighting chance, but they need to get ahead early, and I predict even if they get ahead by a single score, they should be looking for a game-changing special teams play to put the foot on the gas pedal and try to get 2 scores ahead. I don't know where it will come, maybe a surprise onside, maybe a reverse on kick return, or with Ohio State's aggression on special teams, they might try to fake a punt. Other than this, if they cannot contain Smith and Igbuka, I don't think they've got a shot in hell at being in this game, if I'm going to be real. In a world where Ohio State has it even remotely their way, it's a final score of, let's call it 42-24, and the only way Notre Dame has a chance of pulling off this game is if the final score is like 24-21. That's assuming it doesn't go to overtime, where that can obviously be warped, but I don't think this game passes 50 points in regulation if Notre Dame wants to win the game. And I also think it's going to require either a special teams touchdown by Notre Dame or a defensive touchdown by Notre Dame. But as always, let me know what you guys think. Love to see the comments, and peace.